I'm Melika Yildiz. I will present or recap something about the oral skills presentation that we had in the cosmology school, and it will basically be an overview and some of my personal favorites. I'm going to start with an introduction. Now, what will be discussed? We're going to talk about structure of presentations, what to do in Q&A sessions, how to deal with your audience in some situations, verbal and non-communications that you can use, and visual aids and assertive language, and finally a short conclusion. About the structure, there are 3 building blocks of most presentations, which is the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. In the introduction, you mention what you will say. In the body, you actually say it, and in the conclusion, you sum it all up. Usually, and personally, for shorter presentations, I tend to skip the introduction slide, where everything here, as you can see, is summed up. Because if it's short, then it takes too much time to go over what you want to say. But now, for the sake of the structure presentation, I included it anyways, to use it as an example. The next section will be on how to deal with various situations during Q&A sessions. You can prepare for a presentation, but you might not always have an answer ready. And here I want to give an example of when you get a question that consists of several questions. The first thing you can do is break it up. And for example, say you have a question that consists of 3 questions. Verify if you understand the 3 questions correctly. But here I want to note that the timing, so when you receive this question, matters. For example, if you get a huge question during your presentation, then it might be convenient to park it. So to ask if it's okay that you answer the question at the end of your presentation, especially if you think you will touch upon some subjects that are in the question. So the question might be answered anyways. And if the question is afterwards, then, like I said, break it up and verify if you understand the entire question or several questions correctly. Now, some tips on how to keep the attention of the audience. Obviously, maybe obvious, the first thing is eye contact. If you're talking to someone, naturally, you want to have eye contact with that person. And eye contact is also comes in handy in for another use, but more on that later. And it would also be good to every now and then also focus on reading the audience. Is what you're saying being delivered to your audience or not? And if you see that the audience seems confused, elaborate, or maybe ask if everything is clear or if there are any questions in the meantime. And I think this especially goes for lectures. Another thing you can do is use a blank slide. If you're teaching or you notice that there was a lot of information and you want to take a little break, just a little blank slide can refocus. Another thing you can do is pause in an unnatural moment. People who may have dozed off could refocus their attention, because if you talk and suddenly you pause, it breaks a pattern and it might get people's attention back. Now, the use of verbal communication, so tips on how to improve your sound and language. And I want to note that some of these things can be helped. For example, if you have a very high voice, you can't do anything about it. But if you can, try to control the pitch and try to sound as calm as possible. Also, don't scream and don't talk too fast. Also, the latter is maybe not always in your control whenever you're maybe nervous. What I personally really liked that was mentioned during the presentation was that accents are normal, especially if English is not your native language. It's good to accept that there are accents. And also the use of discourse markers, such as if you're going to sum something up, firstly, blah, 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 secondly, blah, 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 and finally. This is something that I tend to pay more attention to while writing and actually less while speaking. So this was really good for me to hear. And the same goes if you compare something. You can start by saying on the one hand this and on the other that. It will prepare the crowd that you're going to sum something up. And now the use of nonverbal communication. So how to convince your crowd of your confidence. Personally, I would say that strong and neutral body language is the key to deliver a story and to convince the crowd of it. And why the combination of strong and neutral? Well, strong shows that you're confident. And by also keeping it neutral, there's nothing that distracts the crowd. And I would say that's perfect. And here's where eye contact comes back. Because if you make eye contact with the audience, it shows that you're confident, that you're not scared of looking the audience in the eyes. So that's also, for me, what comes off as strong. And also they were given some tips not to seem nervous. And these are basically standard things of maybe not standing still the entire time, and or playing with your hair or clicking with your pen if you're holding one. You can also use visual aids on slides, and this is basically the outlook of your slides. So here are some general tips, and I want to start with showing what you really should not do. So here are basically all the things that are terrible, such as overcrowding the slides with text. I didn't use a proper font and size here because, well, the fonts are ridiculous, and especially the combination of it. And the text below is way too small to actually read. So to sum the tips up, don't use funky colors or fonts or sizes and animation, because this animation has no purpose, and I would actually say that it takes too much time. So my advice would be a neutral presentation. A little bit of color is definitely not wrong, but just so that it doesn't distract. And finally, the use of assertive language in your presentation, or maybe more in situations where questions are asked. So you want to be direct and clear, and obviously also respectful. I want to show the example that was given. So if you're aggressive, you tend to force your needs or opinions upon others, and could often involve bullying or pushing around, and no room for compromise or anything. Well, on the other hand, if you're assertive, you express your needs clearly but respectfully. So you leave some time or space for the other person, and treat others with respect. And there's room for compromise. What I want to note here, though, is that this is an ideal situation which may not be handled all the time, because you can easily do this when you're calm, but if a situation tends to be more stressed, or if you're put on the spot or something, it can be the case that you forget to think about this, but it's always good to pay attention to it. And finally, the slide that I actually also would omit in the short presentation, but it was just to point out that in the structure you have the introduction, body, and the conclusion. So I want to thank you so much for the attention and the fun times at the Cosmology School.